I first heard about Genesis from a documentary that had been made about him, and I was sent this by the producer of the film, and he said to me, "You got to check this guy out. He's amazing." So I watched it, and I was actually in LA here at the time, and he was in New Zealand, and he sort of sent me this very low res file, and everyone's face was kind of like 1 pixel. But even then, after about 20 minutes, I was booking my flight back to New Zealand because I was so blown away by him as a person. He was such an incredible combination of intelligence. He was so articulate. He had such a fascinating worldview and philosophy, but he was also riddled with contradictions. There was such a massive complexity to him as a character. So I immediately wanted to meet him. So I flew back to New Zealand, and myself and Tom went down to Gisborne, and we went to Jen's house. And of course, he didn't let us down at all. When we arrived and when I first walked in, he was standing there wearing pink Crocs, like the ones that are in the film, which immediately made me know I had to get those in the film. And he did a kind of a nunchuck thing there, and he was in these strange tights, and you kind of didn't know what to say. And then after that, I sat down with him over a chessboard, and I think that was the moment that we really first kind of bonded, because I've played chess since I was a kid, so I quickly lost to him, but not too quickly that I didn't manage to get a little kernel of his respect. And he kind of began to open up, and from there we played hundreds and hundreds of games, and we just talked, and we talked all about his life and his experiences, and as I say, he had an incredibly eloquent way of describing, his struggles with his mental health and all sorts of his experiences. So I began writing the script. I was very sort of blessed to know Jen for about the last year of his life. So for the initial period, I was really just wanting to know more about him. And as I say, I was kind of like putting together a vast array of the different facets of this man's life and thinking about the way to approach telling his story. And there was the obvious kind of narrative aspect of the club and the kids in this tournament, but which kind of was a way of stringing things together. But for me, I was much more drawn to and fascinated by Jen's own sort of inner struggle, and his also his ability to kind of communicate with these kids through chess. So not so much in the end ultimately about whether they're great chess players or not, or even if they win a tournament or not, but instead what he can actually try and use his own hardship and his own struggles he's been through to not only try and rise above that, but to use that to actually help others around him.
And so, Cliff, can you talk a little bit about preparing to play a character who's actually a living person versus? Is there a different preparations from when you're creating a character sort of from whole cloth?
Oh, absolutely. The relationship with a fictional character is between you and the page, and you're given license and permission by the director to interpret the writer's work. It's pretty obvious that there's an obligation to a living person, but to give you a sense, I never got to meet him. Likewise, I saw the documentary and it enthralled and intrigued. But it was when I went to his hometown and I met with his family. I met his wife, his son, the other characters that are portrayed in the film, Noble and the Jedi. And they got me in a car and we went up for a small drive and we pulled into a graveyard and they stood me at the grave site of Jen. And it was just a very clear message to me how cherished and beloved he was to them. So it was a personal relationship then. It wasn't something I was interpreting from James's work on the page. I now had my own direct personal relationship with him, his son, his wife, and his two dearest friends, basically his family. And I was, from that moment, beholden to them.
So did Jen's family continue to collaborate with you as you went into production?
Absolutely, and that was one of the things that was quite sort of a tough. There was a very, very tough moment there, because when we lost Jen, when he passed away, as I say, I'd been working on it for about a year, and no one saw that coming. It was a real shock, and suddenly the film went from being a movie about this guy that could come to the premiere and I could sit there and look at him and have a laugh and what did you think, suddenly now this is going to become his legacy. People will define him as this. This will be what he is remembered for, essentially, if the film manages to do what it should do. And with that, suddenly there was an immense amount of pressure, but also it meant that his friends and his very close friends and his family had to step in and kind of help to make sure that we were doing it justice. So we had them on set every day when we were shooting to make sure that everything we were doing was kind of authentic and respectful. They were, the first people to show a cut to, and it was a very, stressful moment when they saw it, because it was really important to do justice to these people's lives, knowing that they would, as I say, be kind of held accountable to it in a way. So if they hadn't liked it, if they hadn't enjoyed that screening, I knew there were some very tough moments for us, because I didn't want to disrespect that. But thankfully, they loved it, and they were incredibly, supportive.
So while you're shooting on location there, looking at the film, it looks like basically it was shot entirely with handheld cameras. So Cliff, could you talk a little bit about that style and how that impacted the performance and how you tackled each scene?
James could probably speak a little bit more about the technical aspects of it, but how it made the process for us, I think, fluid as much as possible in terms of how we moved through the space and how we related to the environment and how we related to each other. And so that's always a plus. But to qualify that, James also encouraged me to approach the role from the place as a method actor, which I'd never done before. And so that was really challenging. There were a couple of really close calls there where I could have taken out the cameraman and the camera. There were a couple of moments there with the car, with the windscreen.
Absolutely.
And when the police were trying to get me in the van, there were just a couple of moments there where thankfully they weren't on tripods; they could actually move.
And to talk about that quickly, because I think again when we were starting to discuss this, the potential of Cliff trying to inhabit the role, and it sort of became apparent that, I mean, you look at Cliff right now, and he's a sort of very slim, handsome, leading man. In Genesis, as you have just seen in the picture, was a big guy with funny haircuts and missing teeth and, all these incredible, beautiful eccentricities. So it was like, with such an extreme character, what is an extreme way to approach it to try and get in there? And so Cliff ended up putting on about close to 60 pounds in, not much more than 6 weeks. And
what's your secret?
No. It actually took me longer than that. It took me months.
Well, most of it was in the last 6 weeks, because I was watching terrified, waiting, because people have asked me, were you worried about Cliff's health? And I was like, no, not really. I was more worried if he was going to be fat enough on the first day of filming, because, I had this really, excited idea of a beautiful, robust Cliff. And thankfully we got that.
I was getting a little bit worried. I was attempting to put the weight on over a period of 3 to 6 months, and I was getting some weight on. I was, I'm middle-aged, so it wasn't that hard to get some weight on. But to get over the line, I had to employ a very specific technique. It's called beer.
Oh, that's the secret ingredient.
And also the other thing I was struggling with was trying to
production loves, by the way.
Insurance. And trying to wrap my head around the game of chess. So the beer served a dual purpose. It helped me transform physically, and it helped me enjoy the game of chess immensely.
Beer and chess. I didn't realize
might not commonly put the two together. But it really does make it a lot more fun.
That was how it worked with the real Jen as well. I mean, like a lot of my games, Jen had this incredible way. He'd get a box of Steinies and Steinlager beers, and he would drink them while we'd be playing. And of course, I would sort of meekly try and keep up and fail miserably. And as he'd finish each beer, he'd stack them in a chess-like format.
Oh, okay.
With the empty bottles. So, there's this real chess thing. So, I mean, you kind of embraced that, and that helped with the weight. And it sort of,
I was heading somewhere between 1 dozen to 2 dozen beers a day.
And Cliff's not a drinker, by the way. Just, seriously. So that was, there was a sacrifice there. But the other sacrifice was I asked this very committed man here to essentially stay in character for the entirety of the shoot, and that was something that neither of us had.
I was not keen.
No, you weren't at all. No, at all. In fact, both those things, when I asked you to put the weight on and stay, you were like, no, that's not going to happen.
Well, but you see, this was interesting because it comes back to your first question, because if it was just my role to interpret, I wouldn't have put on the weight. And I probably would not have gone for the method thing because I have a family. They're just technical issues of like, how do I stay in character and have a discussion about marks and camera? And I was like, how do you do that? It was very challenging for me. But added to that was a character, a being who psychologically was on the edge. He was on the precipice each day. And I lived like that, like for
a long time,
months.
A long time. And this is, I mean,
but because it was a real person, and because I had an obligation to honor who he was and his struggles, it just organically became the only choice.
And so how was that relating to the other actors? Because my understanding is that there was a mixture of both professional actors and non-actors in the.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of the actors had never acted before. So the guy that plays Araki, the brother in the film, he'd never acted before in his life. We actually found him in a WINS office in New Zealand, which is like a benefit kind of unemployment office. We'd put a sign up there saying we were looking for Māori men in their 40s, a good daily rate, tattoos and criminal records welcomed. And so we had a queue down the block, and Wayne happened to be one of those people that threw his hat in the ring. And from the first, he kind of put something small down on tape that our wonderful casting director Yvette went and did, and immediately it seemed like there's something there. You know, there is something special about this guy, but he's never acted before. He doesn't have an agent. He doesn't even have a phone number at that point. And so Yvette kind of was like, but I think you should really, take a closer look. And I kind of felt that as well. So I thought, well, let's throw him in the deep end and make him read the toughest scene in the film opposite Cliff. I found out later that Wayne had to catch, I think it was like 3 bus rides to get there, a couple of hours of constant stops. He walks in, and right from the very first take was exceptional. And from that point on, he was exceptional. He's an extremely intelligent guy and just had incredible instincts for someone that had never done it before.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.